Imagine finding a dead man, mummified by salt and time, calmly seated in his boat adrift in the middle of the Pacific. He holds a radio in his hand, as if calling for help when his last breath overtook him. This real-life scene is one of the greatest maritime mysteries ever recorded. Who was Manfred Fritz Beijerinck? How did he die? And why did his body remain intact while his boat wandered aimlessly through the ocean? What you're about to hear is another true story of mysteries, enigmas, odysseys, and curiosities we share here on the channel related to the sea. And this story, in particular, is yet another chilling enigma that the ocean refused to keep hidden. In 2008, Germans Manfred Fritz Beijerinck and his wife, Claudia, were known among sailors as an inseparable couple. United by their passion for the sea, they had sailed together to all corners of the world aboard their yacht, Sao. But, like the ocean itself, life is full of twists and turns. That year, the couple decided to part ways. Claudia chose to stay on Martinique Island, while Manfred continued his life at sea. 2 years later, Claudia passed away from a sudden illness. The news hit Manfred like a devastating wave. He had always been a man of adventurous spirit and a calm demeanor, but now he was consumed by grief. It was then that he made a decision that would forever change the course of his life. He abandoned all connections on land and set out alone to the ocean, seeking solace in the vast blue expanse. For years, Manfred sailed in solitude. Reports from other sailors indicated that he was cordial but reserved. The few times he docked at a port, he was seen resupplying his boat and quickly returning to the sea, as if the land no longer belonged to him. It was as if he were running from something, or perhaps searching for it. At some point in his journey, however, Manfred vanished. With no close friends or family maintaining contact, no one immediately noticed his absence. The Sao, once cutting through the waves as a symbol of freedom, became a floating mystery. On January 31st, 2016, the sea appeared infinite and serene. The crew of the Lemax Exchange, one of the boats competing in the Clipper 2015/2016 regatta, was accustomed to the vastness of the Pacific Ocean. But that day would be different from the others. From afar, someone spotted what appeared to be a dismasted yacht adrift. Abandoned boats are not uncommon at sea. The ocean has a strange habit of keeping secrets and, sometimes, giving them back. But there was something different about this yacht. Even from a distance, it seemed to carry an invisible weight. The name on the hull, Sao, stood out as the Lemax Exchange approached. The boat was clearly weathered but still floated with a sense of dignity, as if resisting time and oblivion. The sailors knew they had to investigate. After all, the sea has its unwritten rules. Ignoring a drifting vessel is like turning your back on a cry for help. Hearts beat faster aboard the Lemax Exchange as they drew closer. Would it just be another boat abandoned to time? Or was there something more hidden aboard? When the sailors finally boarded the Sao, what they found was unforgettable. Seated at the navigation table, as if in the middle of an important task, was the body of a 59-year-old man later identified as Manfred Fritz Beijerinck. He held the radio handset, as if he had been trying to call for help in his final moments. And here's the most disturbing detail. Manfred was not just lifeless. He was mummified. The salt, wind, and dry air had done something that seemed impossible. His skin was dried, but his posture was intact. It was as though time had stopped for him. Imagine for a moment what the crew must have felt. They were accustomed to the dangers of the sea, but nothing had prepared them for this. One of the sailors murmured, "It's as if he's still trying to say something," and perhaps he was. After all, the sea always has something to teach, even in silence. Inside the boat, everything seemed frozen in time. Manfred's belongings were in place. Nautical charts, small personal items, even food he had probably stored for the journey. It was as though he had simply veered off course, leaving a story unfinished. And here the sea gives us one of its harshest lessons. It doesn't care about our plans. You can be the most experienced sailor, the boldest explorer, but the ocean makes no promises. It is both beautiful and unforgiving, and it never lets you forget it. The sailors, shaken, took photos and videos to document what they had found. They knew they had to report the discovery to authorities, but they also felt that the scene carried something greater. It wasn't just about Manfred's death. It was about how the ocean keeps its secrets and occasionally reveals them in the most unexpected ways. As they left the Sao behind, one question echoed in everyone's minds. What had happened to Manfred on that boat? And perhaps even more disturbing, how long had he been there, waiting to be found? Returning to the deck was marked by a heavy, almost oppressive atmosphere among the crew of the Lomax Exchange. It was as if the Sao had left something behind, a silence that spoke louder than any words. The sea, so vast and full of life, suddenly seemed empty, with all attention fixed on that small yacht and the mystery it held. One sailor, visibly shaken, commented to another, "How long do you think he was there?" The question lingered in the air, but no one dared to answer. There was something unsettling about imagining Manfred's solitude in his final days, surrounded only by water and silence. The captain, normally exuding unshakable calm, also seemed different. Gathering the crew to discuss their next steps, his voice was less steady than usual. "This isn't something you see every day. We need to handle this the right way," he said. There was agreement. The priority was to notify the authorities, but everyone felt something more needed to be done. It wasn't just about maritime protocol. There was a quiet desire to honor the man who, in some way, seemed both familiar and distant. The captain decided to send a direct report to the regatta organizers and the U.S. Coast Guard in Guam regarding the discovery and its location. However, the instructions were clear. The crew was to continue the competition, leaving the case to local authorities. Exactly what you heard. After notifying the regatta organizers, who chose not to make the discovery public to avoid tarnishing the event's image, though they informed the U.S. Coast Guard since the Sao was floating not far from Guam, the crew resumed the crossing, leaving the case in the hands of the police, who, however, did nothing. But before continuing their journey, the captain made an unusual decision. He asked the crew to write small notes or messages for Manfred. Some hesitated, but most accepted, seeing it as a way to cope with the impact of the discovery. The messages were simple but filled with respect. "May you rest in peace, wherever you are now. Thank you for reminding us of the power and fragility of the sea. Your journey will not be forgotten." The notes were left in a small waterproof box on the Sao's deck as a final tribute. When the Lomax Exchange finally moved away, there were no audible farewells, only silent glances at the yacht continuing its solitary path, carried by the ocean. That day, every sailor learned a difficult but important lesson. The sea holds stories we're not always ready to hear, and sometimes it delivers them so directly that they're impossible to ignore. A little over a month later, the Sao was spotted again, this time by a group of fishermen in the Philippine Sea, nearly 1,000 nautical miles from where it had been found by the crew of the Lomax Exchange. The ocean, with its slow and steady rhythm, seemed determined to push the yacht further into mystery. The fishermen, accustomed to long days at sea and its many surprises, initially thought it was just another abandoned vessel. But as they drew closer, something made them hesitate. There was an eerie calm surrounding the Sao, as if it were silent yet full of meaning. When they boarded the vessel, they encountered the same sight that had shocked the regatta crew. The body of Manfred Fritz Bajrit remained exactly as before, seated at the navigation table, holding the radio handset. The scene appeared untouched by time, as though it were being safeguarded by the ocean itself. Unlike the previous crew, the fishermen immediately contacted local authorities. They knew that this boat and its mysterious occupant required urgent attention. When authorities arrived to investigate the Sao, they were struck by the state of both the boat and the body. It was as if time had stood still. Despite having drifted for so long, the interior of the yacht was nearly intact. The ocean currents, which usually destroy and scatter everything in their path, seemed to have spared the Sao and its story. Manfred's body, still mummified, continued to defy simple explanations. "It was as if he was still waiting for someone," remarked one of the officials involved in the case. It was a stark reminder of the isolation the ocean can impose and the price it sometimes exacts on those who seek refuge in its embrace. The Sao was towed to a nearby port, where it would finally be examined in detail. Yet, even with the boat on solid ground, the mystery it carried only seemed to grow larger. When news of the Sao and Manfred Fritz Bajrit's mummified body became public, The reaction was immediate. Images of the scene were shared in newspapers and across social media, showing the man seated at the navigation table, still holding the radio handset. The story was as fascinating as it was unsettling. Headlines around the world varied between respect and sensationalism. Some highlighted the tragedy of a lonely man who met his end at sea. Others focused on the incredibly preserved state of his body, as if the ocean had intentionally kept his story intact to be told. Many began speculating about Manfred's final moments. Was he trying to call for help? How long had the Sao been adrift before it was found? Why had no one searched for him earlier? The story became the subject of documentaries and mystery programs, but for many, it seemed as though the full answers would never come. Despite the public fascination, the case also revealed a disconcerting truth: the inaction of authorities. From the time the Sao was first spotted by the Max Exchange crew, weeks passed before any concrete steps were taken. Even after the yacht was towed ashore, no thorough investigation was conducted to determine the exact trajectory of the boat or what might have occurred before Manfred's death. Many questioned how such an extraordinary case could have been treated with such indifference. Some theorized that the lack of close family and the difficulty of tracing Manfred's recent past contributed to the neglect. Others pointed to maritime bureaucracy and the lack of interest in solving mysteries that didn't involve evident crimes. Meanwhile, the Sao, even in custody, seemed to fade into obscurity, this time into a sea of paperwork and silence. For those following the case, the indifference only made the story more intriguing. After authorities were notified, Manfred Fritz Bajerit's body was taken for analysis. The inevitable question arose: how did he die? Was it a crime? An accident? Or was it simply the toll of isolation? The autopsy provided a simple yet tragic answer: Manfred suffered a heart attack. According to medical examiners, the stress caused by the yacht's dismasting, combined with his age and medical history, likely triggered the fatal event. Imagine the scenario. Alone in the middle of the ocean, facing a critical problem with the yacht, with no one to help. His heart simply couldn't bear it. But there's a poignant detail in this story. Even in his final moments, Manfred didn't give up. He held the radio handset, attempting to call for help, as if his will to live outweighed the despair. It's a heartbreaking scene that shows how humans fight until the very end, even in the most adverse conditions. Ultimately, it reflects another truth about the sea: it demands respect. It doesn't forgive mistakes, but also has the power to show us our strength and our fragility. Perhaps the most intriguing aspect of this story is the condition in which Manfred's body was found. Science offers an explanation, though it doesn't make it any less remarkable. The yacht, with its high salinity and dry air circulating inside, created the perfect conditions for self-mummification. It's as if the environment itself preserved Manfred, turning him into a figure frozen in time. This doesn't happen easily. Normally, the heat and humidity of the ocean accelerate decomposition. But the Sao, in its solitude adrift, became an unusual cocoon, a setting as unique as the story of its occupant. It's almost poetic in a somber way to think that the boat Manfred loved so much also became the place that so meticulously guarded him. For doctors and scientists, it was a fascinating discovery. For sailors and the curious, it was something that defied understanding. How can a man be claimed by death and yet remain as though still alive? The story of Manfred Fritz Bajerit is more than a tale of a drifting yacht or a maritime mystery. It's a profound reflection on solitude, the choices we make, and the impact they have on our lives. Grieving the loss of his wife Claudia, Manfred sought refuge in the sea. But the ocean, despite its vastness, can be a lonely place. The sea is a realm of contrasts. It offers freedom, but also reminds us of our smallness before nature. For Manfred, the ocean seemed like a sanctuary, a place where he could escape painful memories and perhaps reconnect with himself. But the same vastness that welcomed him also isolated him, leading him to a fate as silent as the endless blue surrounding him. This choice to face the sea alone is something many of us replicate in other aspects of life. How often do we emotionally isolate ourselves in search of peace, only to realize that isolation can become an even greater burden? The Sao also carries its own symbolism. A boat that, even damaged, continued to float, drifting across the ocean like a time capsule. It shows how life can carry on, even in the face of immense adversity. But what intrigues most is the lack of clear answers. Did Manfred know he was facing his final moments? Or was the radio in his hand merely a reflection of human hope, which persists even when all seems lost? These questions may never be answered, and perhaps that's the most fascinating part of this story. The ocean keeps its secrets, and it isn't always willing to share them. For many, the sail represents human fragility in the face of nature. For others, it's a symbol of resilience, a boat that refused to sink even after losing its captain. For Manfred, perhaps it was the final home he chose, or the destiny the sea reserved for him. What did you think of this mysterious and true story? Do you think the first crew to spot the sail acted responsibly by continuing the competition? Share your opinion in the comments. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with your friends. Oh, and if you enjoyed this story, click on the video appearing here on the screen. I'm sure you'll like it too. There are more sea stories waiting for you. Big hugs, and until the next sea tale.